Right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Deloitte Gen AI webinar today. Very happy that you could join us. Welcome to the webinar. We're sure you will find it most useful. Today, we're talking about generative AI and how it's changing the game in financial services and what is the massive opportunity that Gen AI presents to us. We're very privileged to have two very learned specialists in this area. Dr. Yania Okwachim and then Dr. Christoph Nivout, two PhDs specifically in this area. So we have got the very best for you this afternoon. Just to let you know that the webinar this afternoon is being recorded. And then if you would like to ask a question, either put your hand up or put something in the chat and we'll relay those questions to the panel members. My name is Kevin Black. I run financial services for Deloitte in Africa. And again, just want to say how happy we are to have you join us this afternoon. Quick introductions of the two doctors with us this afternoon. Christoph, I'm going to start with Yania, if you don't mind, my colleague from Deloitte. Yania is a partner and is our AI and data leader for Deloitte Africa, where she oversees the delivery of all our AI and analytics solutions for all of our clients across most of our industries. She has 15 years of experience in AI and analytics and has delivered many projects to many of our large clients. She's worked as a big data consultant in the UK, in the US, and in Asia Pac, where she provided data warehousing solutions to major international financial institutions, telcos, and retailers, including some of the large banks like HSBC, UBS, BT, Citigroup, and MasterCard, to name a few. She tells me she's passionate, and I know she's passionate about applying AI for social good and empowering the next generation of AI talent in Africa, and has published various thought leadership articles in AI. Yania has a PhD in artificial intelligence from University College London with 6 scientific publications. Thank you, Yania. Right, over to Christoph. Yania will kick it off, but let me introduce Christoph now, and I just want to thank Christoph for joining us. Christoph's varied career includes registering as a practicing engineer, completing 4 degrees. 4 degrees. He must have loved this, including a PhD in engineering on machine learning. He's consulted with McKinsey & Company and has worked across 5 continents. He joined the First Rand Group in 2004 in the West Bank division to grow their international business. In 2007, he became head of credit, and in 2010, he became FNB's chief risk officer and the First Rand head of retail credit. In 2016, he became the CEO of FNB Consumer in perhaps what is the most contested space in SA banking. And then in 2020, he became the FNB chief data and analytics officer, a newly created position. I'm sure he'll tell you a little bit more about that today. But Christoph, thanks again for joining us. But we're going to kick off the conversation this afternoon with Yania, just giving us a little bit of a background and a scene setter on why now all the chat and the hype around Gen AI. So just to kind of set the scene, over to you, Yania. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be here on this session with Christoph and yourself. So in the next few minutes, I'm just going to take us through what is AI, what is generative AI, what's all the hype about, and what does it mean? What does it mean for businesses, especially financial services industry, before I hand over to Christoph to take us through some of the wonderful work he and the team are doing at FNB. So artificial intelligence can be defined in so many different ways, but essentially it's the idea of making intelligent machines. Machines, programs, algorithms that can mimic human behavior. And AI has been around for decades. In fact, the very first type of this machine was built in the 50s by Alan Turing, trying to trick a human operator thinking that a machine can respond as if it's a human. And then the journey from the 50s to now, where we have ChatGPT and generative AI. But why is it now all of a sudden that's at the forefront of everyone's mind? Why is it now that every business is trying to leverage artificial intelligence? Well, there are several factors that are contributing to this, but the very main reason simply is data. And in fact, the explosion of data. Every single thing that we do today generates data. Every time you pick up the phone to make a phone call, that generates data. Every time you send a text message, that's data. Every time you pick your favorite movie on Netflix or favorite series and what to watch, that generates data. Which means over the years, data has gone from the simple Excel rows and columns and structured data to this massive unstructured data that we're dealing with today. In fact, so much so that one can claim that 90% of the data that exists today was created in the last 2 years. If we could take a pause and really reflect on that, it just shows you the exponential rate that the data is growing today. So that means that we simply cannot afford to do manual processing of data, or some of the basic tools that we had at our fingertips are no longer sufficient to really harness these hugely voluminous data to be able to gain insight. So imagine as a bank, you have over 150 million transactions a month, perhaps, or more. How are you going to gain insights? How are you going to do your analysis? So this is why now AI has become the tool of choice, because it can intelligently help you gain insights and help you make data-driven decisions. The second biggest factor is the more accessibility and cheaper storage and infrastructure. I'm sure some of us will remember back in the days where we had those floppy disks with a few kilobytes of space. I remember in college, I had to submit my homework on those, and never mind that it would get corrupted if I just don't put it in my bag in the right way. Fast forward to today, we have access to cloud. That's accessible storage, unlimited storage that you can store the data in. So we have the infrastructure, we have the storage, and we have the data. So now we need the tools to be able to leverage this data. There are other key factors as well why AI is becoming very dominant in the market and of critical importance. And that's also because regulators are now expecting organizations to harness technology to be able to meet their regulatory compliance obligations. The deadlines are being shortened. The window of submitting your compliance reports are being shortened, but there's no excuse. You cannot come and say, oh, I have loads of data to go through. Can I get an extension? Regulators now expecting that you modernize your compliance function through AI and advanced analytics to be able to meet your compliance requirements. And finally, not to mention competition. Now AI is being used to go to market faster. So there is this peer-to-peer competition that now is making AI the number one thing at the forefront of executives and leaders. But as I said, AI has been around. And I think one key important thing for us to understand is that AI is not a thing of the future. It's not to come in the next 5 years. It's here. It has been here. Some of us are even using this on a daily basis. Some of you, if you have heard of Alexa or any other intelligent device that uses natural language processing, that's already something that is a household item. My 2-year-old used to ask, Alexa, play Baby Shark. That's his favorite nursery rhyme. Or when my son is going and asking the older one for his favorite Afrobeat song, he doesn't understand that he's interacting with an intelligent device that has been empowered by AI, and specifically natural language processing, that can understand the human language. It can interpret it, then it can go and action the ask, in which in this case is select the music from the library and play. So on this page, you see the various forms of artificial intelligence. One of them is speech recognition and natural language processing. So I always think about this as, if you think of AI like a robot, the natural language processing and speech recognition is like the ears and the mouth of the robot that can understand speech and it can respond. Then there's computer vision. Computer vision is the eyes of the robot. So those are a series of AI algorithms that are able to interpret images and videos, and they're able to interpret the scenes in a similar way that humans can do. For example, when you're trying to log into your mobile app banking device and it's doing facial recognition to log you in, that is computer vision. That is already being used, where it recognizes the certain features and it recognizes your identity based on your specific features. Computer vision also has other applications. The sports fans here, I'm sure you know the Hawkeye in tennis, where it's the computer or the VR is able to determine whether the ball was in or out or on the line. And that is computer vision. It's able to track the projection of the ball and tell you whether it's in or outside the court. So you can see AI is already around us and it's already being used. So before we move on to generative AI, I think it's important to now really understand what are the specific types of AI, what can it do for us? If you go back to the example that I mentioned, if you think of AI as the robot, then there is another component of AI called machine learning. Machine learning is essentially the brain of the robot. And that's how you train a model to be intelligent, to be smart, and to learn and perform tasks similar to humans. So very briefly, we're going to talk about the three different ways that you can teach an AI model various things. And these three categories are supervised learning, where you actually train the model by giving them some ground truth, like training a child. Unsupervised is when you throw them in the wild and say, go figure it out. And reinforcement learning is the old carrot and stick, so it's somewhere in the middle. So let's go to supervised learning. Supervised learning, this is where you're teaching the AI algorithm like you teach a child. Now, consider my 2-year-old. Let's say my 2-year-old, I'm trying to teach him what cats and dogs look like. How would I do that? I would typically have these flashcards where I would be showing different pictures of cats. This is a Persian cat. This is some other type of cat. This is this other cat. And here's a bunch of pictures of dogs. This is a bulldog. This is a terrier. This is a poodle, etc. And hopefully, after seeing maybe 50 different cards, I can bring a new flashcard that he's never seen before. And then I can ask him, what is this? And hopefully, his brain has been trained on what cats look like, what dogs look like, and he can then infer that information from the new flashcard and say, that's a cat. However, it's also very important to point out that the training data that was used to teach my child is very key. For example, imagine I only use real images of cats and dogs to teach my child. And now I pull in a card of this cartoon cat with a bow tie and a top hat. And I'm asking my poor child, what is this? He's never seen a cartoon cat before, so he's going to struggle. And this is the same in real life, in businesses. This is where we talk about then inclusion and bias and not bias, and what kind of data and population are you going to train your model on so that in the future, you're not unintentionally biased. Because if your decision is going to be made about a certain demographic, but you've excluded certain class from that demographic when you're training your model, then you stand no chance of being able to extend that facility to them, because your algorithm is not going to recognize them as valid outputs. So basically, this is a supervised learning. And then there's unsupervised learning, where the algorithm is given a population of data, and then it tries to find similar features to cluster the information based on what it can see. Now, you can think about this back to my 2-year-old son. I can throw in a whole bunch of cards of cats and dogs, and hopefully he's intelligent enough to see that cats have pointy ears, maybe dogs have shorter tails or different features, cats have whiskers, and he will group these together. And at the end, he's going to emerge with 2 different clusters. One of them are cats and one of them are dogs. And this is also a very good problem that AI can solve in real life. This is predominantly used for document classification. When it comes to investigation and you need to understand which documents are relevant to your case and what's not, yes, you can do some certain keyword searches, but AI algorithm can actually be used to find underlying patterns that are available in your data. Similarly, you might have an audience, a demographic. Yes, you might do typical demographic analysis and say, select all my females between ages of 18 and 25 and select others between men ages of 50 and above. However, if you use AI, it might find different underlying patterns that you were not even aware of. Maybe there are men and women who are interested in yoga. And then you have this completely other different group who are interested in finance and education. These are the interesting patterns that can emerge and that can help you extend specific products to them. And finally, reinforcement learning is used a lot in gaming theory and also in robotics. So this should hopefully give you an idea of what AI is, or what we now can call it traditional AI. Then we hear about generative AI. So what is generative AI all about? And what is the difference between the traditional AI and generative AI? So from what you heard me so far saying, traditional AI can predict a single value. It could be a single class. Is it a cat or is it a dog? Is it a man or a woman? Or a single real value, a number. For example, what's going to be the stock market values next week? Or what's NVIDIA shares going to look like in 6 months from now? That's a single value. However, generative AI can create a whole new artifact. It could be in the form of a whole new document, text message, an image, a video, a music, or even computer code. That could be Python code, etc. And how does it do that? So this is based on large language models where it goes and understands, digests a whole corpus of document and data, and it understands the syntax. So if I was to then take this back to my 2-year-old example, it's like teaching my 2-year-old how to make a sentence by teaching him saying a sentence has a subject and an object and a verb. And once he learns that, he can go and create as many sentences as he wants. Similarly, you can teach a computer program what an architectural blueprint looks like for a 2-story building. Then all you have to do is give it the command or the prompt to say, go and create me a 2-story building that is 50 square meters. It can learn what a Python code, a syntax of a Python code looks like, or what poetry, a specific type of poetry is consisted of. And then it can go ahead and generate that. And that is the power of generative AI. What does that mean? That means you can get images like this. For example, the prompt here on the right-hand side was, go and create me an avocado chair. The generative AI model knows what avocado looks like. It knows what a chair looks like, and it's merged the two to create an avocado chair. Or the picture in the middle, somebody said, go and create a couture dress made out of garbage bags, and that's what you get. And the one on the left-hand side is actually that my 2-year-old, who's now 5-year-old's homework, and he simply said, my future home is going to be a duplex, black and white duplex, who can fly, and but it's not a helicopter, and it has solar panels. And AI has gone and created this image. So now what does this mean? It means with generative AI, AI is becoming very accessible to everyone, even without the technical knowledge. That means you can go simply from a command, a text, into generating results. And this is very powerful. So we now heard, right? You can basically be very creative with generative AI, and it can create unicorns playing a musical instrument on Mars. But what does that mean for your business? And this is where it gets very interesting. So with generative AI, it's really transforming the way we do business, and this is why we call it a game changer. It can have several different games and impacts. At the very least, you can take your current processes and you can optimize it with AI and generative AI to do that better. Or knowing what you can do now, going from natural language to a prompt, an output, you can change the way you do business. And that's a different level of changing the game. And finally, when we're looking at 5 years down the line, what our survey and conversations with a lot of the banks across the world have shown us is that now AI is moving away from being an instrument of strategy to actually becoming a component of strategy. Now that we know what AI can do, how can we do business? What are the new businesses that we can create? And we can categorize this in 3 different components. We can enhance user experience by completely personalizing it. We can improve the executives and staff's experience by putting AI in front of them to leverage. Every single person and executive in a bank could have their own mini agent and assistant to do specific things for them. But the biggest value is when you use generative AI to unlock the power of enterprise data. And specifically in the banking sector, here are some of the use cases that we see widespread and currently being used. AI is used to increase efficiency, where a lot of repetitive tasks that use manual work are now being automated. Imagine creating reports. Instead of somebody having to, an IT person having to extract some data from the database, somebody having to write the report specifically so that the audience like it, and then somebody tidies it up and submits it. Instead of taking weeks, you can actually have that generative AI in the fingertips of the end user to start asking questions. And that speeds up. You can also improve accuracy by leveraging a lot more volume of data for specific niche functions. You can actually improve the accuracy of the results and the predictions. Creativity, you can imagine your marketing department, instead of having to take few weeks to create one campaign and one set of visuals, imagine being able to create new visuals per individual, per audience on the spot. So it's really changing the game. And finally, protection. One of the things that generative AI can do is actually synthesize data. So, and fraud detection is a good example where we don't hopefully have a lot of good examples of fraud in the past, but you can use generative AI, knowing the different typologies that fraud appears in your region, in your market, to create loads of synthetic fraud data, and then use a traditional AI model to make the model more robust so that it can do better predictions. So these are some of the high-level trends that we see in the financial services industry. I'm now going to hand over to Christoph, who'll tell us about all the things that they are doing in FMB, and you will get first-hand experience of what's currently being done in banks. I'll hand over to you now, Chris.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Christoph.
Okay, cool.
Here we go.
Yeah, Yanni, that was really good. I mean, it's such a good overview. I mean, and Kevin, I can jump into what our data journey, what we're doing, if you want.
And then I was on mute. So thanks, Christoph. Thanks, Yania. Thanks for that insight and setting the scene. So, Christoph, how is FNB thinking about harnessing the massive amounts of data that you've got right on clients, and your kind of AI journey around using that AI across your customers, your business, your staff? Where's your kind of thinking as a big bank in Africa?
So Kevin, I think we've been using AI for probably a decade at least. Okay, so and that was really the traditional AI that Yanni mentioned. A lot of those use cases would be, for example, what is the kind of data that we have as financial services? For example, we have transactions. So we process 2.5 billion payments totaling 50 trillion rand a year. So on that, there's things like fraud detection, anti-money laundering, even writing the reports, right? 100,000 plus reports per annum sent to the FIC, etc. I mean, those could be automated using natural language processing, etc. Then on credit side, with a trillion rand balance sheet in South Africa, or lending balance sheet in South Africa, credit, you accountants, first 9 capital models. Then on the insurance side, we've got more than 1 trillion rand sum insured. So for 17 models, all the underwriting models, etc. All of those would use, some level of AI or more simple modeling to do. So that's really what we could do in the past. Now, what generative AI has unlocked is it actually assimilates knowledge itself. That is really how I explain the power of that beyond what people have done. So it actually can take language, and language is not just English and French and Portuguese and local languages, etc. It's computer languages, Johnny said, it's Java, Python, etc. But then mathematics, physics, chemistry, it actually can assimilate all of that knowledge in a way, and think about the way that you can then apply it in your organization. So if you're thinking about human capital, risk, compliance, procurement, finance, all of the knowledge in your organization that describes the processes that needs to be done there, the policies, the frameworks, etc., that can all be assimilated by models that can help your staff actually do their work. So that is really what the big unlock here of generative AI is it is actually much more broad-based than what the specialized applications that Yania showed that have been built before, that were really in specialist areas, and it would happen almost in the background. If your fingerprint identification, the selfie, the fraud checks on the documents, it would happen. It would happen without you really noticing it. Now, actually, it is augmenting humans because it is really adding to knowledge. And that I would say is the big transformation that Gen AI is going to deliver, let's say, over the next 5 years, because it's still really in its infancy.
Thanks, Christoph. And how are you thinking about the power of the generative AI in terms of modernizing your offering and that kind of customer UX capability that you've got now in the front end? How are you thinking about that?
Okay, absolutely. So I think customer facing is, let's say, that is the more risky part of obviously of AI, getting sign off on that. But really, if you think about it, our Navi is the persona on our app that really is, at the moment, you've got search and chat functionality. What I can say, what we have done well is there is significant functionality that you can deep link to on the app. But what is customer facing at the moment is not actually that smart from generative AI. So what we are developing in the background will be able to much better explain to you what the steps are or give you advice. So building in financial advisory components, if you think about that in South Africa and in Africa, access to a financial advisor is very expensive. If you want to actually give people advice, and that is from simple nudges. Everything is not actually setting up, let's say, investments, etc. That really comes when you have wealth. But if you don't have wealth, it's really about even managing your money, understanding your credit profile, how to use credit well, how to invest for emergencies. What is the role of insurance, etc. That kind of advice is really what we want to deliver to customers at scale. So how can you help customers actually manage their finances better and unlock that in a major way? Then together with that is the level of hyper-personalization that Yanni was also saying, the ability now to actually tone the marketing messages and CI down to a customer segment of one. And that really would be on the internet-facing platforms where people would be clicking into, your environment and into your own environment where you are optimizing, what offers, etc. you're showing customers and what solutions you are presenting and the description of those, being able to hyper-personalize them. That I would say are the key use cases that we are now looking at Gen AI, which previously would have been impossible to do. You can think about it. We've got 10 million customers plus that we're targeting. Tailoring marketing material at a customer segment of one just was not possible before, but it is now actually quite feasible.
Fantastic. What are some of the issues you've got to consider in this journey with customers, Christoph? What are the ethical issues, the privacy issues that we've got to keep in mind, and potentially some of the challenges, whether it be bias or fairness in decision making? What are some of the challenges we've got to overcome when we look to go down this road of kind of hyper personalization for our customers?
Yeah, I think that is a great point. And look at people. Have been initially, everybody was very afraid of just the privacy component. That was ChatGPT. Look, it's going to take your information. It's going to learn something from you that, is going to externalize your client's confidential information. So clearly, you need to operate in let's say, a private virtual cloud environment where you actually have the keys to your data. The data is not used for any other purpose by let's say you're using, one of the three hyperscalers, all three are set up in South Africa, etc. You have to set up an environment that is secure. So a private virtual cloud setup is like the minimum standard. Then you also have to understand how you are using the models, how you are screening privacy information from it. And even if you have your own model and you're adapting it, you have to be careful that you're not exposing one client's data to another. So how you are segregating the environment. If you're making use of smart LLMs, they can do function calling. They can actually execute code to give an answer, etc. You have to be really careful that you are doing that in the context of the customer with the customer's data. Then you have to filter for harmful content. That is a big factor. So I must say the frameworks now have developed. They are quite mature. So the level of filtering that you have on these models to make sure the content is not harmful that you're doing, that is far in excess of what you can do in a human process on a contact center or, etc. So those are the kind of controls. That's not comprehensive, but those are really some of the big factors. Then I think accuracy, last one. Just if you think about these models, do they hallucinate? Well, yes, they are trained on the internet. So they do not have your company's own data. So if you want to describe your own process to the customer for doing something, or there is your own policies in terms of what advice you would give in a given situation, and that's also quite a regulated, phase regulated activity, etc. You have to be able to determine the answer based on your internal approaches and content. And therefore, there are various ways of doing that. The most simple way people would tell you is you prompt engineer it to tell it you can't say this or that. Now, that is a pretty weak control, if one had to be honest. Then you would move to something called a retrieval augmented generation, where you are embedding your content into a vector database, and you are forcing the model to quote your own policies, etc. Or then obviously one can use adaptive training on the models. But there's a variety of approaches that you can follow and that you absolutely need to follow if you are doing a customer-facing deployment.
I see we have some hands raised. We'll try and get that person on. Logan, we're going to try and see if we can get you to ask your question here. And Bartek, sorry, I've seen your question. I'll relay that to Yanni. But maybe while we try and get Logan on the call, Christoph, what's the risk for us as financial services companies, for the bad actors, in the market to be a little bit ahead of us in their use of Gen AI, to commit fraud? We haven't seen too many kind of deep fake scandals in our market, but it's something that you guys have got to keep top of mind, right? And stay one step ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, fraud, let's say, our methods for fraud, if you think about it, 2.5 billion payments our customers do a year, and each of them we have to do 4 checks, etc. A lot of that we obviously control by, on our platform itself. So if you're coming in via the trusted platform, then we absolutely know who we are dealing with, etc. They obviously, our customers often can get scanned into revealing information that, for example, can link a card, or the business email compromise that gets sent invoices where the account numbers have been edited, etc. There is just so much to do in terms of fraud. But like you say, generative AI can take that to the next level. I must say we have not seen that kind of fraud attacks that you're mentioning, where the deepfake video conferencing, the Hong Kong example, and those are pretty famous ones. We do think people just have to be very careful now. Even seeing somebody on video does not necessarily even mean it is that person. I mean, you have to be very careful. You have to, in financial institutions, really, you have to use your methods of authenticating a customer when you are doing a transaction for the customer. You have to check the validity of the information, etc. And then cybercrime is clearly a big category on its own as well. That is also augmented by the ability of criminals to use these methods.
And Kevin, if I may just ask something to Christoph, these deep fakes, I think now we're living in an era to come that the source of information becomes even more important than the content. So you need to know who to believe, right? And then, we have now, I'm sure all of us have heard about the digital clones or the AI clones, and there are only like a couple of companies, and you have to go extensively where they record your voice and create your, liking and all of that. They have to have very strict controls, and you need to sign off on certain things. I mean, those frameworks have to be put in place. But for us, or the general public, we have to pay attention to the source.
And maybe just to continue on this theme a little bit. So Christoph, what's the impact going to be on our people, right? So we're in a knowledge economy, we're in knowledge businesses. I've heard it once, I've heard it 20 times. What does this mean for me and my job, right? For the middle manager. Yanni spoke a little bit earlier about Siri and Alexa and her son, talking to Siri. I mean, we're not far off from that smart assistant, the Siri and Alexa on steroids. That's thinking ahead and planning your day and making sure that everything works well for you. I've heard talk of giving employees 1.5 days back in their work week because of the opportunities that Gen AI in terms of efficiency and productivity, what that's going to bring to the table. What's your thoughts on how this is going to impact ways of work and people that work in the knowledge economy?
Yeah, Kevin, I do think that the impact is it will be revolutionary in the long term, but in the short term, it's quite evolutionary. So a lot of the tools like you get that are built into some of the products like the Teams, etc. It helps, it takes minutes. It can keep you up to date with meetings. It can help you draft emails, etc. A lot of that, if it only saves like 15 or half an hour a day, there's a big saying that often the biggest beneficiary of that may be your dog, because you can go home early and take them for a walk. So companies actually struggle to monetize the smaller gains. And it is quite important to focus on the key opportunities where it can have a bigger impact. I do think the long-term impact is going to be quite pervasive, but the impact is incremental. So some of the areas that we see, the number one application of Gen AI in banks globally is actually coding. Okay, so if you think about the amount of cost that the financial service institution spends on writing code, and whether that is Java or C Sharp, or now we're trying to do a lot more Python because that's really a new language for us, and then even SQL and other languages as well. It is seen as a major productivity enhancer, but it doesn't actually, I don't think we're not in the short term planning to have fewer coders. So we have got a backlog of IT tasks that is one of the biggest ways in which we can actually give customers value, is through IT enhancement. So that we think is really augmenting the ability, and it ensures that we remain competitive as a bank. I do think that is a key factor to think about. This is, if you do not do this, you will actually become uncompetitive from a delivery perspective, etc. Now, the rest of the applications are, would be more bespoke. So let's say a judgmental credit process is a very expensive and very laborious effort in financial institutions across, from wholesale, commercial credit, even retail judgmental credit, etc. I mean, the amount of reports that get written and then assessed by other people, etc., the ability to automate some of that tasks, investment decisions, that is really where I guess we see huge value accruing. But again, I think the impact again will be over time. But think about this. I mean, typically in a big financial institution, you will have a churn rate of staff of, let's say, something south of 10%. That would be high. Let's say 6, 7, 8% or whatever. That churn rate in staff, actually, if you could actually convert that into a productivity benefit in terms of what you're doing, that would still put you in a very, very nice trajectory from a cost to income ratio perspective. And global banks are really under pressure. From a cost to income perspective, the market's very competitive. Margins are getting thinner all the time. This enhanced knowledge that customers will have will also enable them to better look for solutions, etc. So there's external pressure going to come onto the margins. In the US, they say NIM is dead. So the net interest margin that banks have been earning in the US on sitting on lazy deposits, etc., that is under huge attack. So that's where actually some of this is what we as banks have to do just to fight, just to keep up with the pressure on margins as things progress.
And Kevin, just a quick one to add, Christoph, like you nicely said, in terms of the rules, evolution to revolution. And I really like in coding even. I think when I mentioned this is also increasing employee experience and, enhancing that, it means that, your coders, computer developers, your programmers, having just built this code, say in Java for this new system, gone through testing, now you moved from Java to another system and needs, I don't know, C Sharp. Instead of them having to go through all of that, they can just take that code and transform it and change it. So I think roles are actually now being transformed. Employees shouldn't be worried about losing their talent, but rather they learn these new skills of adapting AI and generative AI to do their jobs better. And you might find that attrition will also reduce because now there's more, quality and more sort of better experience in the work that, employees are doing. So that, it's not just about writing the same code over and over again, but using the code, using AI to shorten that process. So then they have freed up time to go walk their dog or anything else that they want to do. And it's a win-win for everyone.
Go home and walk our dogs. Absolutely. But it is going to require of our people that they are agile, and that it's going to be a continual kind of learning environment, hyper-adjusting, hyper-learning environment to enable them to stay ahead of the curve as this technology evolves, right? It's going to require a different focus from our people. And we're going to have to help them through that process.
Correct.
I think that's a great point. I mean, I found that actually the adoption is a big, big factor. So but the previous generation of AI models actually were quite easy in a way to deploy because they are deployed into, I mean, if you put in a system that identifies a customer or facing, etc., the take-up is really easy. Here, you need your staff to take up the product. You need your customers to be comfortable to engage with the bot. And that actually is quite a big journey. And especially, I think, on the internal side, on staff, there's still, like you say, some people see it as a threat. The business change management journey is very, very complicated. And I think it needs exec buy-in to actually set the tone. Look, this is the direction we're going. You have to obviously develop pretty good tools and pick the right applications where you think it can have a bigger impact. One of the things that we're doing is we built an internal Gen AI agent that democratizes access to information in the group. So that is HR policies, risk, compliance, procurement. I mentioned them at the start. So all of those areas where previously, if you had a question on, what kind of special leave is there for this or for that, or whatever it was, disciplinary processes or anything complicated, you would always have to ask an expert. Now you can actually have the documentation. I think there again, the key thing is to engender trust in these solutions. It can't be just stuff that the thing answers from the internet. It's got to have your own documents that you can link through and you can click through. It gives you the answer. You can click through. You can check it out for yourself, etc., and apply it. And we think that is really a way of getting a lot of people in the organization to buy into the concept before you actually have all these bespoke applications that will develop over time.
Christoph, you use the word adoption, integration, all these good things you're doing in the business. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on the call who are saying intellectually, theoretically, I understand all of this. It makes a lot of sense. And many of the executives on the call are saying, we've used this and we've dabbled here, we've built something, but we really, this stuff is not kind of mainstream in our organizations yet in terms of touching our customers, working internally. Yanni, Christoph, where do they start? How do you take the first bite at this? What are the things you need to consider to implement the true power of Gen AI in your business? How do you start at this? What are the things you need to think about? Yanni, why don't you have a go? Yeah.
Oh, okay. And Christoph, you can go ahead, please. So, I mean, we see this a lot, right? Because as a professional services firm, we work with a lot of clients and they are in different places in this maturity journey. So it depends on where you are on this journey. And that's where, then we can support you on where you need to be. I think the very first, for every organization, they need to reflect on their maturity. Where are you? It's a journey. Yes, everybody wants to be at the high end of doing fancy things and, everything is rosy and everyone is happy. But you look back and you say, well, but we have data quality issues. You need to go ahead and solve that, right? So, and also some of the other challenges we see that, yes, AI is being used in silo in the different parts of the organization. But really at an executive level, we're lost. We're like shooting in the dark. We don't know where we are with this, which is why it's important to understand. And it's important to strategize. Like I said before, businesses are now aligning their AI strategy with the business strategy. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? Where do you want to be in 2 years' time? Where are you now? What are your challenges? And how can AI help you get there? I'll tell from our perspective of how, say, Deloitte helps clients, and I'd like Chris to also tell us, like you as your organization, how you got there. So as Deloitte, where we see the most benefit is that let's help you understand. You mentioned, Christoph, executive buy-in, and it's key. Because for you to transform your talent, you need to have investment in your talent. For you to really leverage AI, you need to have that executive buy-in, the culture of an innovative mindset. So where we see that the client is struggling with that executive buy-in, because the technology teams, the chief data officers, AI officers, CTOs, they know what AI can do. They know they need it. But if the executive doesn't really have that awareness, then there's a gap. So we do a lot of executive briefing and training where we walk them through what AI can do for you as an organization. And once that gap is filled, then organizations come and say, okay, we get it, but where do we start? Like, what are the use cases? then one has to go and by talking to every stakeholder, the different functions, and I'm sure, Christoph, this is what you've done as well. You understand various use cases that are applicable to each function. Then you prioritize that, right? So we bring everyone into a green room, we talk and say, okay, this is your business strategy. Here are 100 use cases. Which one of these use cases are good for you? And you assess them in terms of feasibility, viability. Do you have the data? Do you have the technology? Do you have the skills to do it? And you prioritize that. And then the third phase is to get some tangible results, right? Because AI and Gen AI specifically is still a bit experimental. So you go for those quick wins. You do a POC, you build an MVP, a minimum viable product that can give you tangible results. Then you get your business buying, everyone is happy, and then you go and scale up, right? And the next step is the implementation and the scale up. And this is, I think, where a lot of myth comes in. And I really want, Christoph, you talk about this as well. You know, sometimes when I talk to clients, they're like, AI is very expensive. We have to invest a lot and this and that. And then my idea is that, no, you look at your current technology landscape. And you don't have to go and build a fancy tool that does 20 things and you only need one of them. You can actually use your resources. And then organizations like Deloitte, we can do staff augmentation, where we also don't want to come and take over and implement, because organizations need to own this space. You know, businesses need to own and tweak this. So, you know, you can have some SME. So look at the ecosystem. If you need some SME skills, you need some specific Gen AI engineering, LLM engineering, you augment those within your resources, you implement this. And it's a journey. Then you come back to square one in 2 years' time. Technology is advanced, so you have this constant refresher loop, and I think it's important for everyone to not to get overwhelmed, but to know where you are in this journey and where you want to go and how to get there. Christoph.
Yes, so Christoph, before you don't have to give away any of the trade secrets, but obviously, you know, as FNB, one of the leading banks in the country, you've done some great things. So maybe just some thoughts about, you know, how best to use this technology, right?
Yeah, maybe, I mean, I guess a couple of thoughts. Yanni's really covered the value chain really well, from the executive buy-in, the knowledge. And if I can focus a bit on the implementation, because that's always where the rubber hits the road. I mean, what kind of skills do you need to be able to do these things? It actually is quite tricky. These skills are not very common. If I can tell you, when the ChatGPT revolution started, let's say a year and a half ago, we were like, okay, but who's going to do training inside the bank on this topic? And we have quite a number of PhDs on machine learning. Okay, but none of them actually did their stuff on like transformer neural networks. They all predated it. So we had been building, like I said, we had been automating reporting, writing reports and stuff, natural language processing, natural language understanding, sentiment recognition. We've been doing that, let's say, more than almost 7 years ago. Okay. But we all had to actually get some level of retraining here of our own experts. There is some use of contractors, because that's really what you also do. And then I think you do need, if you're serious about this topic, then you will need to build up some internal competency. Now, we have made that transition of appointing chief data analytics officers. I'm not going to promote that too much, but that really means actually that if you think about data, where if you think in your organization that data is a BI function that does management reporting, then you are not on this page. Then AI is still actually very far away from where you are, right? So thinking about model deployment, etc., as part of that, and analytics, and now AI as part of what that kind of role is, and to what level do you have that in your organization, is going to be quite critical to unlock the value. Unless your executives themselves are highly technical, they are going to need some guidance on this topic, and it's not always the traditional CIO community's area of expertise. So what we're talking about here is typically you're going to deploy in cloud. I mean, very few South African organizations would be able to buy NVIDIA, H100, 200 series. I mean, the cost is insane and prohibitive, but the variable cost of using this stuff on a AWS, Azure, and now GCP in February, you have got 3 competing offers that you can look at. And getting a team that can actually drive those key use cases that Yanni spoke about. Identify the ones that will have the biggest impact. Then do figure out whether you need to build it or buy it. There is so much stuff that is being built by the vendors. If you think you are going to rebuild what vendors are building in certain areas, then probably you are missing the point. And doing implementations for your own content, though, is very important. The off-the-shelf stuff. If you're using ChatGPT, nothing against OpenAI, we love their models as well. But the off-the-shelf stuff does not know your company. So you do need to have some level of implementation ability that can create, for example, vector DBs of your own content and expose that to your staff, etc. You will need to get some level of technical expertise to deliver those key use cases in your organization. I think then obviously the stuff like governance around it and all of that stuff becomes a very big issue. If you're in a regulated entity, then you obviously would have thought about that, really well in advance as well.
This is all quite easy stuff, right? This is not hard to get going. Hopefully, the webinar has been useful for some of you today to kind of start highlighting the things that you've got to be thinking about, in scaling this up in your organization. There was a question earlier on, and we're running out of time quite rapidly, and we could probably talk for days on this stuff because it's really exciting. But Bartek, I'm gonna go to your question. Brilliant discussion so far after 20 minutes of Yanni. Sorry, I'm going to come to your question now, but anyway, thanks. Currently, the large language models we are using are scraping from the open internet. This, however, contains elements of misinformation, as a lot of the internet could contain popular opinions and not always factually true. How can we ensure that there are sufficient guardrails in place, which is, I suppose, a bias and fairness question here, to ensure that the information we get is accurate and usable? I don't know who wants to pick up that question.
I'll take that one if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my
Sure.
starting point around what people call hallucination, right? I mean, the point is, yes, these models were trained on a lot of data. It does mean that they actually can understand words and the context of words really, really well, and they can write really, really well. But to answer questions in your context, you actually have to ensure that you are using a framework, like I mentioned, retrieval augmented generation. Okay, I know this is a technical term, but think of it, it is actually teaching this brain that was trained on the internet, what is the specific, your policies, your frameworks, your procedures, your advice, your product descriptions, etc. You have to have all of that content. You have to have organized that content. And you have to expose it. And it's not that hard to get it to actually answer the questions using your own information. That, I would say, is the minimum requirement for using AI, unless, of course, your staff are just looking for information on the web, which could be useful if you're researching and you're doing research, etc. But for your own internal use, that is really the minimum starting point for any solution.
And also that's exactly right, Chris. And the ask is also, how do you put sufficient guardrails, right? So for a heavily regulated sector like FSI, it's really easy when there's a law, there's a regulation, you have to comply, you know exactly what to do, you go tick the box. But with AI, it's a little bit tricky, right? Because the whole world is still grappling with this. With the very first comprehensive regulation, which is the EU AI Act, only came to effect in March, and that still, has some guidelines, which is why it makes it a bit trickier for organizations. But I think our advice is you don't have to wait for the regulation to come out. You need to be proactive. You need to put your AI governance in place. You need to put your safeguarding in place. And you need to have your AI policy. And that could be simple things like what's permissible, what's not permissible, what can you use? You can't put you can go and say, Janya told us to use AI to quickly create this report for my CFO, but it doesn't mean to put your company confidential information out there to ChatGPT to get that report back. You simply cannot do that, right? And then there are other things that you can actually do in practice, by risk rating your various AI applications. Then the due diligence, the controls that you need to put in place. And there's that human in the loop, right? If it's a critical decision, then how do you put that human in the loop? How do you create accountability, right? I always use this example. If you're making a decision using AI, it needs to hold in court. And we have had examples before where there was this a few years ago, a judge in US or the prosecutors used some company that was using AI, and then they recommended the maximum sentence for this person. And then when they asked why, they couldn't answer. They just said, because AI said that this person is twice as likely to commit a crime if they come back to society. But because the information was used as a black box. How do you know racial information was not used to come up with that decision? So it's now putting those things in place where you check for transparency and explainability of your AI models. How do you make sure there's no risks involved there? How do you make sure there's no bias? Which is why then we see also new roles. You mentioned the chief data analytics officer. We're seeing the emergence of chief AI officer, chief ethics officer, all these roles that are coming about because we need to have accountability. Yes, an algorithm was used to come up to this decision, but at the end of the day, there's a human who is accountable for this. And then everything in between, right? How do you put the specific processes that are in line with your company's risk management framework, cybersecurity framework, data protection policy, and the rest? So banks and organizations need to proactively put this framework and governance in place now before it's too late.
Fantastic. Thank you. Logan, I see you've had your hand up for a while. I think we've opened up your line if you've got a quick question, if you want to ask it.
Yeah, sure. With the new models, a lot of them can now take in like audio and image. How have you seen those models being used in business, and how can we use those newer models?
Okay, maybe a comment on that. The multimodal AI model. So, for example, GTP4o would be the premium one on the Azure side or on the Microsoft side, or Gemini. Gemini 1.5, etc., would be the Google ones. Okay, these models, what they really are powerful, I guess, in our setup is they can understand documents. They can understand the structured and unstructured data in documents, extract that, and add the meaning to it. So if you're using these models to analyze, let's say, financial statements or to process invoices, etc., it can now do both. It mixes the traditional OCR that can actually recognize the characters. It can now understand what a table is, what the metadata is, for example, what the rows and the columns mean, extract that data, and be able to combine that with its ability to write about it. So that is in our space, and obviously in other industries, this could be quite, in the media and entertainment industries, etc. You can imagine there's lots of other areas in which the applications of multimodal is even more prevalent. But certainly in our space, we are finding that these models are actually really powerful. They are more expensive to use. So in terms of the token cost, etc., you have to trade that off, and the availability of the GPUs to get access to it, etc. But certainly, yes, there are some really powerful models that are coming out, and then there's a range of other ones as well that I'm not, going to cover. Yeah.
All right. We've come to the end of our time. I want to thank all of you this afternoon for joining us. I hope you found it very useful. And I want to thank Christoph. I want to thank Jania for taking the time out to share some of the insights with us. Christoph, it's quite clear that F&B are leading the pack and are the cutting edge of utilizing this technology to make their customers experience the very best. So all of you who don't bank with F&B, go and open up an account with F&B and see what all of this good stuff can do for you. If you want to get in touch with Jania, we will send details if you would like to have further conversations with her. But a big thank you to both of you. It's been really enlightening, a good conversation. Really appreciate the time. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope you have a good afternoon. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thanks, Christoph.
Thanks.
Good afternoon.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah. Have a good one. Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.